Hey, Nick.
What's up? We winging it.
Winging it. Doing the Minisode.
So we just got off with Wes Chan. Wesley or Wes?
He goes by both. He's totally flexible. I've asked him 100 times and he says either one works.
That was, I think, one of the most interesting conversations we've had.
Every time I talk to him, it sits in my head. He always does.
Yeah. How do you evaluate that as an LP? I do believe that like really great firms and funds are like a genuine, authentic reflection of the person or people. He seems to exhibit that. I guess your job is evaluating that.
Underwriting FPV is I mean, he's got an impressive body of investing work. So on that level, that's very different than when evaluating like notation one, right? When there just wasn't enough time for your companies to have grown up, right?
Yeah.
But you two are really similar. And this is not just because I'm going to start this whole shout out to the artisanal nature of venture, because OMG did that land. I was like, oh God, he's like saying Asylum with FPV. And there's clearly, right? And this is a little bit what Benchmark says. I was like, oh, this is all in the ether. But there is, when I remember I first talked to you and I was like, oh, Nick sees the world in a specific way. And there's, again, I hate this term first principles because I think we all throw around terms and don't unpack them. But I was like, oh, I get what first principles means, because when I talk to Nick, he thinks about how the world is and how he thinks it's going to be and invests against it. When you talk to Wes, you get the same thing, which is he's got his own phraseology. He's got his own training at Google, which I'd actually never heard him explain as much about Sergey and how that bar is set and how you think about the impact and the changing of the world and don't mess around with the small stuff.
Yep.
And I was like, the original thinking is just there. And then when you marry that with the sort of more process side of the LP, which is what's the fund size, what's the check, does this lend to where their strengths are? I mean, those are all the things where you can just run the numbers and the maths. But it's the thinking part that that resonance is really strong.
I mean, we didn't talk about this on the pod, but like I assume he had unlimited investment demand.
I have to, I mean, I don't remember how many times oversubscribed, but
How'd you work your way in?
God bless Laura being on that bus. Sometimes the serendipity of intersectionality just really helps. And I think appreciating who somebody is as an investor and his colleague and what they're trying to do, it's a better question for him. But we felt there was a lot of sort of similar thinking, because our view is, and actually this is so interesting, his previous firm at Felicis, Iden said this to me a long time ago, was that your LP should be a strategic value. And he didn't mean in the corporate development strategic, although I'm sure there's a component to that. He meant that your LP base should help extend your thinking and be there to be in service and engage and do all of that partnership. And so we've always tried to be that kind of LP. And I think when you listen to how Wes and Pega put together FPV, there were that culture and DNA's there. So I think it was incumbent upon us to show up as partners.
Well done.
Yay. What stood out to you? I've got a whole long list. I was scribbling while he was talking. Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah.
I can start. So some of my favorite takeaways were, in 10 years, what's true of your product that the world can't live without? And that's the bar, not this iterative, and I'm going to make XYZ better, but just his thinking of, I think this is why he built FPV and why you built Asylum. Like, what is the world doesn't even know that it needs, but when we have it, we can't live without it. That is so like gut level inspirational.
Yes, I agreed on all those things. Like the last pod we did with Mike and Jay, like Mike talked a lot about pivots. And Wes was like, nah, no, we ain't doing that. I mean, in fact, he had like strong language, like we're not here to mess around. Like we're not here to like fund, explorations. I mean, certainly explorations, but like we're not here to fund, a bunch of pivoting. Hey, I think maybe I can do this or that. And maybe that comes a little bit with stage, like he's a click later.
I did wonder the exact same thing. I had Mike in my head when he was saying that. And maybe it's the stage difference. And maybe it's also, I can't remember if Mike said this or I read it in his book, but he was talking about pivot being like in basketball when you plant your foot. And it's the core of the firm isn't wildly different, although I mean, there's times when the pivot is actually pretty extreme, right? When you look at Slack and where it started, like not pretty different.
Yeah, Twitter,
pretty different. So, but yes, I was like, ooh, look at this. No pivot.
Yes. I mean, another reminder that every single VC is going to think about this and do this a little differently, for sure. We didn't talk about this at all, but I think, Wes is in New York.
He moves around, but he's in New York now. Yeah. He was in today for the recording.
I'm obviously super biased here, but like, I would believe that it's actually harder to think independently in Silicon Valley when you're just in it, like in every conversation, on the Twitter, at the meetups, and like everyone is like, same thing, just he beats to his own drum, and obviously has the courage to like just do the thing. And obviously he was doing that when he was in San Francisco, but I don't know. I think maybe I'm reading too much into the move to New York, but have you noticed the difference being in Austin versus SF in how you think?
I appreciate what people say about being able to step outside of high frequency areas to get some perspective. And I think for me, it's a bit more, nobody cares what I do when I go to my son's cross country meet. Like you go and all you care about is like the time and the race and the coach and whatever. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of, no one talks shop. Or and it's because if you say what you do, everyone's like, meh, I don't care. And it's lovely. So that's nice because you can actually just be you. And that's probably my most strongest experience versus in the Bay Area. There's just a kind of constant dialogue and you can't put down, I was going to go with a running analogy. You can put down the baton at your kids' activities or something else, but 50% of the people there are probably doing something similar. So if you want to have essentially an ad hoc meeting, you can, but it also means you never really stop. To your point about doing something, letting your brain go into a different direction and see things, it's much harder. Like here's a super random example, but I went to a TED conference a gazillion years ago, and I'm liberal arts, which is all about the intersectionality of different subject matters. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, you can study these different things and bring them together. And that's so cool. And it is really cool, but because people had really studied different activities. And I was like, this is the point of liberal arts, is that you learn from these seemingly very different subject matters. Mm-hmm. And I think our brains, I'm totally off on a tangent, but I think our brains do that. And so there's something nice about being in Austin where I can go and just do something that's totally different and then bring it back here and be like, oh, look, here's a learning.
Yeah, no, you gotta touch some grass.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
And there's obviously value in being in the belly of the proverbial beast. But
well, I think two things were resonant for me when he was talking. I guess they're actually different versions of the same thing, which is knowing what great looks like.
Totally.
And as an investor, as an LP, as a GP, the job is to figure out what great looks like, either at whatever stage we all invest in, right? And his experience at Google taught him, he didn't say it this way, but taught him a lot about what great looks like and how to think about how to change the world. And that training he's applied to investing. And how did you learn what great looks like? And sometimes you have to invest in things that aren't great to learn what great is. But I think some folks, and this is an unpopular thing to say, don't know. And they think it's great and it's not great. And this is why LPs will say, has someone found a unicorn? Because when you see that greatness, it forever changes your perspective on what to invest in.
I even think about myself in that context. And like, I have not seen the level of great that Wes has seen, either working for a company or investing in a company at that scale. And so when I hear him talk, I'm like, even probably I could use like seeing another level of greatness. I mean, my own version of great needs to like continue to expand, I think.
I mean, I remember talking to a VC once who had moved shops, and they said to me, they didn't realize the order of magnitude difference of deal flow and quality of founder. And their comment was, it's like being in one team's playing football. I'm not sure if they meant soccer or football, and the other team's playing, I don't know, frisbee. And not that one sport's better than the other, so we won't pick which one, but they're like, it is wildly different when you see what some of these different like the different step changes between places. And yeah.
I assume the better one was frisbee.
I'm gonna go with that. But it was just interesting.
I actually, you know what? I heard the same thing from a GP, and I'm now wondering if it's the same person.
Oh, I don't know.
My own version of doing this practice, but like I do think about sometimes, having had like, could I have had the experience or use the experience at a much larger, more established firm? Not much larger. I'm not talking about like big bank platform, but
no, I mean, honestly, this is something we talk about when someone's starting a firm, right, from an emerging manager perspective, is kind of how are you going to learn? Because, I mean, you had time at BetaWorks to sort of learn some things.
I had very good external mentors that were definitely practicing great. But it's not quite the same as actually being like in it every day with them.
No, we're going to do the whole arena thing, but it's part of the emerging manager world. And there's a really good reason why people can use being in an established firm for a little while to learn, because there are some aspects, I think, when you look at someone who's starting a new firm and they're rethinking through like how you rethought Asylum and what you wanted to be true. But there's some basics of venture that it's just, how does a cap table work? How do warrants work? How do preferences work? How does recycling work? LPs are less excited to pay for that learning if it can be learned somewhere else, right? And
yeah,
it's just true.
Yeah.
That's not what the LP dollars are meant for.
Thanks for teaching me a little bit.
Oh, dear Lord. I remember
maybe
you told me.
Maybe there was an exception there, but
no, you came back. I remember you came back and you were like, QSBS, and here's my, you got a PhD in it. And I was like,
oh,
shit.
Yeah.
I was like, he knows a lot more than I do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I this is like the least thing, or like maybe the silliest thing that I could brag about, but my partners, John and Mackenzie, tease me about it, but like I'm the internal like tax expert here. And like, I'm pretty deep in that. Like, it's definitely not in the first 10 important things, but like, it does actually have an impact.
100%. I mean, full disclosure, my father used to teach tax, not for venture, but for, regular world. 100% tax and incentives drive so many decisions behind a lot of the scenes.
You know what we should do is we should, at some point, we should talk about QSBS.
Oh, shout out, and we can put it in the speaker notes. My partner, Laura, of much fame, just wrote a whole thought piece on QS.
Yeah. I haven't read it. Let's put it in the show notes because I don't know if it was a conversation with her, but like many of our outcomes at Notation were QSBS eligible. In many cases, the entire return. And for our LPs that don't pay taxes, it doesn't matter. But for our LPs that do pay taxes,
oh, it's huge.
In a very real way, changes the return profile of a fund. And so like, I don't know if I was talking to Laura or someone else about this, but like actually having like an internal cut of our data at some point that includes the QSBS impact, the numbers will look different, better. And it's real. It's not, we're not like, fuzzing. I mean, it's not real for the nonprofit LPs.
No, but I assume it's very real for the founders, which is where it originates. I mean, the point of this is to help.
Real for the founders.
I mean, it benefits the GP and the LP that are taxpayers because the primary focus is the founder, right? And then Laura's blog talks about it from a fund level because that's where LPs, but you could talk about it from the founder level because, again, that's the point of the tax code.
And a founder can structure it in such a way where actually the cap of 10 million is actually much, much, much larger.
Yes, for founders, it's not only just their life changing.
If you do it through trusts and other means, I'm not I may think it, but I'm actually not a tax expert, and so this is not tax advice. But there is a way to do QSBS in a way where actually the vast majority of the outcome could be non-taxable.
Yes. And for folks who are still learning about QSBS, it's all driven by having a significant portion of a share of stock. So by the time it's very diluted by the time it gets to the LP SAN. But for a founder, hopefully they have their strong ownership. It's game changing. And again, the whole tax code is supposed to help support entrepreneurship. So it's oriented in that direction.
Which we can also have a philosophical conversation about this where I'm like, is QSBS really needed?
Oh, I think entrepreneurs have a tough road.
Yeah, but
we're going to cut all of this. The NVCA is going to be like Ixnay.
I'm like, are people really going to not start companies because?
I think a lot of it actually.
Starting a company because of QSBS, then I thought this was really great.
I thought so too. Always fun.
Thanks for joining us. You can learn more about Wesley and his team at fpvventures.com. This and more links in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Origins, the show where we discuss the venture ecosystem through the lens of myself, GP, and Beezer LP.
Origins is produced by OpenLP, a resource from Sapphire Partners for the venture ecosystem to stay on top of the latest VC insights, and done in partnership with Pod People. Please also subscribe to the OpenLP newsletter for a monthly roundup of GP and LP thought leadership, including the newest Origins episodes delivered straight to your inbox. We'll put the link in the speaker notes. I am Beezer Clarkson.
And I'm Nick Chirls, and we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.